Robert F. Kennedy Jr.
Oh yeah.
and Russell Brand,
Yeah.
two people that I really enjoy their takes on a lot of different issues in life, philosophy, spirituality with Russell Brand. How did they end up? How did they end up at your place?
So we randomly met Russell at a recovery meeting in Nashville. Turns out he was in town. We didn't know any of this. He was in town doing a fundraiser for RFK, and he
Uh,
went to a meeting that we run on Wednesday nights at a little clubhouse in Nashville called 202. It's been there since early 70s, I think. So it's kind of a staple of the Nashville recovery community. So we were running a meeting out there. He was there, and after the meeting, Russell said, "Hey, are you guys like with a treatment center or something like that?" And the second shift guy that was working, Evan, he said, "Yeah, you want to come out?" Just like not thinking that he really would. And he was like, "Yeah, I'd love to. I'm flying out
uh,
tomorrow, but I would love to come out and see what you guys are doing." And so he came out, but I didn't know anything
uh,
about the RFK thing. The next morning, this kind of dude rolled up in the parking lot, and I always go check, just
yeah, yeah,
see who's rolling
yeah,
up and
yeah.
see
He's
what's
rolling
going
up.
on. It's
Yeah.
like, "Hey man, can I help you?" And he was like, "Yeah, I'm here to do a tour." And I started looking at this dude, and he had like an earpiece on and stuff, and I was like, "All right." And then I noticed he had a bulletproof vest on,
Oh wow.
and I was like, "All right, you with Russell Brand?" He was like, "Well, I'm with Robert Kennedy Jr. Him and
Uh,
Russell are friends. Is it cool if RFK comes out here too?" And I was like, "Absolutely, man. You
yeah.
guys come on." And I'll give them this. They came out. They didn't talk politics. Nobody asked for
Wow.
votes. They did not do that. What they did is they sat down with the staff and the guests. The first thing Russell said is like, "Cool, man. We can look at buildings, but where's the attics?
Yeah.
I
Oh,
want to meet
wow.
them." And I was
Wow.
like, "All right, let's go."
Why are you rebelling again? What do you got? We're trying to change something.
Skateboarding is a way of learning how to redefine the world around you.
The owners of this country don't care about the poor and the
Now, baby, push me. Push me again now.
screaming at a wall.
What's up, you miscreants, you misfits, you outcast of society? So it has been 3 years since I have been sober. I have not touched alcohol, marijuana, prescription drugs, nothing at all. July 7th was my 3 years of sobriety. So it kind of makes sense that my next guest that I have on the show is connected to recovery. His name is Thomas from Discovery Place Center out in Tennessee, I believe, right, Thomas?
Yeah. Yeah.
Awesome. Cool. So actually was kind of looking through your social media on the Discovery Place page on Instagram, and I saw a photo of Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and Russell Brand.
Yeah.
But before we get into how they ended up at the Discovery Place, how did you end up at the Discovery Place, and what has led you on this journey of sobriety and sharing and helping other people out?
Well, yeah, I appreciate you having me on, man. So how I ended up at Discovery Place. Well, man, I started I'm originally from a little place in Western Kentucky, far Western Kentucky called Hickman, 2,000 people. I moved in my own mind. You're from, California, so the numbers that I'm
Uh,
going to throw at you are probably like, nothing compared to, the population that you're used to. But, I came from a small little city of 2,000 people, and then we moved to a place called Paducah, which is about 26,000 people, something like that. And
all these names sound like they're rural.
yeah, yeah,
Hickman, yeah.
yeah, what you're thinking is probably,
Yeah,
what
yeah,
it is.
yeah,
And what that has to do with me ended up in Discovery Place, I'm not 100% sure, but
yeah,
the long story short, man, I at 12, 13 years old, even before I ever took my first drink or drug, for whatever reason, I was always very interested in it. My grandfather, my dad, a lot of cousins. Alcoholism and drug addiction has been a thing in my family, like a lot of people's family. I've got this memory of being a kid, and this guy that I didn't know, he's knocking on our door, and I remember looking out the door. My parents knew exactly what to do. They knew who it was, and he's shaking, and he's asking for money. And that's always been kind of burnt in my memory. And they knew what was up. He was going through DTs at the time, and he had to do that. So that was, a lot of people had it a lot rougher than me, but alcoholism and drug addiction has definitely been a part of my family for a long time. And I think some of my family they were trying to tell me like cautionary tales about alcoholism and drug addiction. And they didn't hit that way for me. They did not deter me. I was always interested. My mom and dad, my dad's a Vietnam vet and a towboat guy.
What's towboat? What is that?
Oh, okay. What's a towboat? Yeah.
Yeah,
So
I don't know what that is, so there might not be other people
no.
that know what it is too.
So you ever seen the boats that push the big barges down the river?
Yeah, towboat.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
So we're talking, 30 days on the boat at a time, home for 15, and then back on the boat,
Okay.
So Vietnam vet towboat guy could be a little rough around the edges at times. Again, a lot of people had a lot worse upbringing than I did. I'm not an alcoholic because my dad was tough, but you know, it was always around. A lot of cousins that struggled. Some family members and good friends that are still struggling today. The ones that are alive. You know how that is. But I was always just attracted to it. My mom was into classic rock, and music was always a big part of my life. And I ended up finding out my dad used to play in a band, and my mom's always singing, and I remember being a little kid and sex, drugs, rock and roll kind of thing before I knew what all those things were very attractive to me. And you know, so I was at a very early age kind of into this like kind of rock and roll thing, and I love music. And so I'm a young guy and I got these older cousins, and they're turning me on to like Ozzy or Iron Maiden and kind of some metal stuff. And, I just love the whole thing. I love, rock and roll and Beastie Boys and all that kind of stuff. But I liked the idea of, the rebelliousness, and, a lot of guys were able to be into that, but maybe not just end up destroying their lives with drugs,
Right.
But I kind of wanted it all. And so, not much different than a lot of people. We moved to Paducah, and that was a little bit of a shock for me. I was kind of like this insecure, little chubby redneck kid from Hickman, Kentucky, and I'm trying to find my way. And I ended up finding, becoming friends with a couple of guys, and I don't know how, but we got into skateboarding. And again, I want to be clear. It's not like I'm connecting that skateboarding made me a drug addict. I fell in love with skateboarding, but we also, some of us around that time, like we're getting into skateboarding. And
what year was this? Well, I did want to interject. Not to connect it to the name of the recovery center, but like the idea of discovery, I've come to find out it's usually, that's why a lot of people get into skateboarding, because it allows you to discover new places and new people. You're always in search of something, right? And there's actually a tie to that when it comes to doing drugs or doing alcohol. It's this sense of like chaos, but within that chaos, you never know exactly where you're going to go. So there's an aspect for some people, I think, that is very inviting. Not really knowing that it's going to destroy their life, but it's just the catalyst, if you will, for that type of person. And so it makes sense. It makes sense that some people end up on that path.
Exactly why. I'm not sure, but I was angry, insecure, uncomfortable in my own skin, and I found skateboarding. And I was fortunate enough to to not be a total loner. We had a very small crew of guys, and we kind of all got into this thing at the same time. And you know, I'm 44. I don't know how old you are. So this is like, you know, I get into skateboarding like when I'm 11, 12, something like that. I'm just kind of learning, you know, and
So like early 90s, 91.
yeah,
Yeah,
in
okay.
that
All right,
time, like
gotcha.
so, kind of smack right in the middle of the whole vert street thing, you know,
Yeah, yeah,
vert's dead. It's all about street,
yeah.
all that kind of stuff. But um, you know, at 12, 13 years old, I remember me and a couple of buddies, we had made this plan. One of my buddies had rounded up a fifth of vodka and a joint. And, you know, I was looking forward to this moment all week. You know, I'd lied to my parents. His parents are going to be there. I'm going to stay the night over at his house, da, da, da. And, you know, man, I remember when I got over there, I can hardly remember the details of what I did yesterday. I can remember this vividly, you know, where I was, the trailer that we were in, the two guys I was with, the music that we were listening to, and I remember when the vodka started hitting, and especially when we topped it off with that joint, like something really magical happened for me. It was everything that I had built it up to be over the, you know, a couple of years that I'd been kind of thinking about this, and then some. Like I remember saying, I feel better than I've felt in my entire life, which is kind of funny, you know, my entire 12, 13
Yeah,
years on the
yeah, yeah,
planet,
yeah.
you
Yeah.
know. But you know, looking back, obviously there was something, you know, missing. It provided an effect for me that I needed. And you know, those two particular guys, you know, one passed away a few years ago, and one has had his struggles along the way too. But you know, over the years,
Did he pass away
party,
from, did he pass away from addiction
yeah,
or, oh, he
yeah,
did. Oh, okay.
yeah,
That's it.
overdose. But you know, over the years, I would party with people, and you know, you're kind of finding your way as a young teenage guy or whatever, and you know, there were people that would look at me like, the way I always looked at drugs and alcohol was, okay, so how are we gonna do this next, as soon as possible? And you know, along the way, I would have people look at me like, I don't know, maybe next weekend. I'm like, well, why would we wait till next weekend? Let's do it now. You know, by any means necessary, let's feel like that again. And you know, it caused a lot of problems. You know, around that time, it's kind of a perfect storm, if you want to look at it like that. Obviously, my parents start seeing a change in me, combined with the fact that you know, I'm from Hickman, Kentucky, and you know, this is like big pants, small wheels. I think there was a Santa Cruz video called that. You know, I'm also into punk, so I'm coming home like looking crazy to my parents at least. So they're like, his behavior's dramatically changed. We think he's on drugs. You know, his friends have got piercings in their face, like, and I was really, really pissed about that for a long time. Since getting sober and being in recovery, I've been able to like put myself in my parents' shoes. It was very shocking for them, you know,
I bet.
and
Yeah.
they made a lot of mistakes along the way. But you know, just out of nowhere, bam, you know, this this kid, just this change happens. And
What walk me through when you first got into punk rock, because I think for a lot of the skaters in the early 90s, Big Pants Small Wheels, not everybody was really connected to punk rock in the same way that they were like in the 80s. It was more like
right.
hip hop and skateboarding started
And,
to intermingle. I mean, being from a small, I can't imagine being in a small town and being connected to punk rock. How, what did that look like for you, and how did you get connected to it?
well, it's one of those things, man. It's like, it's just the truth for me. It was not a phase. It's you know, in a lot of ways, I don't want to be corny about it, but it saved my life in a lot of ways. Like I never looked at it as like a phase or a temporary thing. Like when I first heard that music, I was always into, like, I remember being into Joan Jett, and I kind of liked Maiden and stuff like that. You know, my older metal cousins and stuff like
Same.
that. But I remember a couple of videos, like back the way we had to get into music, or the way we got into music, was through skate videos. and yeah, there was the, like the Mike Carroll stuff. He was always, he had Beastie Boys, and I love the Beastie Boys, and Sean Sheffy would skate to Del the Funky Homo Sapien and all that. But and I like that stuff. But what, like, something happened. I remember watching Planet Earth Now and Later was a video that just, it's still, I can see the cassette, I can see what it looked like in my head, and it had Ob Ivy on it. I can't remember who was skating to it, but and I was like, I don't know, man, I got chill bumps on my arms.
Yeah.
Something happened.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's what I've been looking for. It what, if like that feeling, like, oh, this
Yeah.
this is it. So from there, I'm just like, just a dog trying to find music, and through skate videos, Op Ivy. I remember the Questionable video came out, which was nuts. Nobody, not from where I'm from, had seen anything like that. The skating was nuts. And then the music in that video, I remember Bad Religion was in that video. What else? I think Pennywise was in that video. There was a slam section that had Pennywise in it. And, I'm just like, at that point, like, I got to find more about this music. And, and I had, funny enough, even in like small town Western Kentucky, there was a skate shop had opened up within walking distance of my house. So of course, I'm up there every day, getting on the dude's nerves probably that worked there. But I'm friends with him today, and I ended up playing in a punk band with him years later. But
Oh, wow.
at that time, a 5-year age gap is a bigger deal when you're 12 and he's 17 than it is as you get in your 40s.
Were you about 14 around this age, or were you the
Yeah,
same
something
age?
like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
14-ish. And
Yeah.
so he would let me know what's up. And he was either, he had been sponsored briefly, or was like a flow rider or something for A1 Meats. You remember that company?
No.
Yeah, that's like an old wheel company. And Zorlak skateboards.
Yeah.
They had the Metallica boards and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, it was through skate videos and skateboarding. And obviously now I've got to get my hands on every Thrasher that I can get, and I would just search and search and search. So we had a mall, and there was like two record stores there. And what we would do is we just start at A, and we just start looking, what looks cool. And I found the Descendants that way.
Oh, wow. Do you remember which album that was from the Descendants?
Yeah, Two Things at Once.
Oh, yeah, that's one of my favorites, actually.
Yeah, it's like,
great.
yeah, you see SST Records. Okay, I gotta have that. And that was fun to me. I'm showing my age for sure. Kids these days, they have access to everything on their phones. But that was a lot of fun to me, man. I just, Black Flag and so early Green Day stuff was on some of those skate videos, I think, and heard about Lookout Records and
Lookout Records, Screeching Weasel.
Screeching Weasel.
Yes. How was the scene what was the population at this?
It's about 26,000. So somehow, some way, like I said, there were skateboarders there. The guy that ran the skate shop was from Chicago, so he kind of knew what was up.
Yeah.
Another guy who I ended up playing in this punk band with for years, Danny, he was on a small little, he was sponsored by a small little company called Exile for a while. So these dudes skated, and, for us, I don't know if it's that way today, but like punk rock and skateboarding were very connected for us, and maybe that's because we were about 2 years behind of what everybody else was doing by the time it made its way, to us. But for whatever reason, it was punk rock and skateboarding. So yeah, man, that's how I got into all that.
Yeah. So you ended up discovering alcohol, and I mean, how did that affect like your skateboarding? Did you ever have aspirations of doing anything with skateboarding?
I was never I was never as good as I wanted to be,
Yeah.
but I did love it. Like,
Yeah.
I love skating. I just kind of I was in trouble all the time at this point in my life, and my parents, like, my dad didn't play. Like, if he said it was
Right.
this, and I that we had a lot of turmoil in my home for quite
Yeah.
a few years, and I was out of the house by the time I was 17. But I loved everything about skateboarding. I liked the way the skateboards looked. I would look at the concave. I love skateboarding. I always knew that I wasn't gonna go anywhere professionally with it. There's
Mhm.
a couple of guys around town, Dan being one of them, that could have, I
Yeah.
think. It's a uphill battle being in Western Kentucky, though. It's tough.
Yeah.
It may be easier these days, but back then you would have probably had to move if you were going to get a big sponsorship or
Oh,
something.
for sure. You had to move to San Diego or
Yeah,
New York or something like that. I mean, it's
right.
kind of so. What was the punk scene like for you in a small town? I mean, other than being able to go search out some records, did you have a scene in a small town like that?
Yeah, we did.
Yeah.
And bands would come from Louisville. That was kind of a thing. And there's been for whatever reason, there's been a punk rock scene in the Paducah area for a long time, since the 80s. Actually, there was this band, Cherub Scourge, that was from Louisville, that did pretty well, and they would come into town, and back then, I don't know what you guys called them. We called them hall shows because there was no venue, so you had to rent out like a
Right.
Moose Lodge or Elk Lodge or whatever.
Yeah.
And
They actually do that out here in El Monte, which is like 30 minutes from me. But I actually saw the Rattlescents there. It was like some of the guys from Adolescence.
Nice.
But at one of those lodges. So, and they had like people selling records and like the inside, and then they had some bands playing on the outside. It
Yeah,
felt it felt very old school and like what it probably used to be like for the most part.
yeah, because it's changed a lot. And I'm not complaining. If I'm going to be honest, I liked that nobody that you could get hassled, that you stuck out, but you did. Like, it wasn't easy to be a skateboarder and a punk rocker in Western Kentucky in
Yeah.
1995.
Yeah.
Uh,
I mean,
you know,
especially for like jocks, and I mean, it's the stereotypical. I mean, everything that you would listen to in a lyric in a song from the 80s, whether it be Dead Kennedys or whatever, you were living in a place where like Jello Biafra is just going through and it's getting hassled going through this small hick town. How,
right,
do you
right.
have any experiences that you want to talk
Yeah,
about? Or yeah,
yeah. Like I said, I was lucky enough to have a few buddies, not a lot, but we were able to look out for each other, and
I think
we didn't get it.
I'm getting sorry. I'm getting I think we'll have to stop and then redo the thing after 30 minutes. I think the on the Zoom.
Okay.
Because it says your free meeting will end in 10 minutes. Uh, and then we'll just have to I think redo it or something like that.
All right.
I think that's the way it goes. Uh, all right. You may proceed, sir.
All right. Um, but yeah, I mean, man, like I don't know what it was like where you were at, but yeah, the jock thing was it was a thing. I mean, trying to decide whether or not I should tell you the term that got used a lot,
I
skater fag was a thing,
yeah,
you
yeah,
know,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
and people would hassle you just for being out there. Like, my buddies have got videos of us skating and them skating, and people would just roll up like, you can't be doing this here. Like, why? Well, just because I don't like it. I
Yeah.
don't like you guys on those stairs. And,
Yeah, yeah.
every place was a bust, and especially trying to put together a punk rock show. Like, you were very you stuck out a lot. So some of the shows got shut down, and it was a mess, but looking back, I liked it that way. Like,
Yeah, I bet. Yeah.
exciting. We're
Yeah.
not supposed to be doing this. They hate this. It's what I'm looking for. you know?
Yeah. It's exactly what I'm looking for. It's interesting because I got into punk rock while I was in prison. So I had a little bit of taste of what that felt like because I had to I did. I ran white, so there was always Peckerwoods that were, into Leonard Skinner and, shit like that. We would play our punk rock music and, they were always trying to make fun of it. And then I even cut
Right.
my hair into a mohawk when I was in there too. And then, they were always like trying to clown and give you shit. And,
Right.
so I got a little taste of that, but when I got out, it was just completely different. It was so acceptable, especially here in, Los Angeles,
Right.
that I wanted to experience that feeling, I guess, of the struggle of what it meant to be, you know what I mean, a punk rocker, and like, which is kind of weird, because you just want to listen to music, you want to be a part of a scene. You don't
Right.
necessarily want to have to deal with that kind of stuff. But there
I got one
is,
funny story about
yeah.
that. So the principal calls me and my buddies in. So at this time, like, I'm trying to find any and everything I can, like punk rock, skateboarding, and I a lot of the guys that were into punk, they were into like, American punk. And I was and still am, but somehow, some way I started hearing about stuff like the Exploited and
All the UK hardcore,
GBH.
yeah, UK hardcore stuff. Yeah,
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 and I
yeah,
I fell in love with that too. And so, at this time, I think, well, it's definitely time to start a band. I can't play anything. I found out I could scream for long periods of time and kind of had a voice.
yeah,
Um, and so, yeah, the principal calls me and my buddy Sam into the office and it's like, you guys can't be wearing like these spikes on your jacket. Is this a gang? Are you guys in a gang? I mean, you could
yeah.
use these to hurt people. And we just thought that was hilarious.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm looking back. I mean, Western Kentucky, out of nowhere, these kids are coming to school, and there's only like four of them, and they've got like spikes on their leather jackets and the Exploited on the back, and
Yeah.
and I had a teacher ask me like, "What's GBH stand for? Great big hairdos?" And
Yeah. Yeah. Good one, teacher.
yeah, yeah, thanks,
Yeah.
man. But
Yeah.
man, we made it. We made it fine. We laughed about a lot of it. Some of it was annoying, but we made it. We stuck together, and we had I'm still friends with all those guys today. So
Yeah. I mean, I definitely always associate or connect when I hear about small towns and punk rock to, I forget his name, and my apologies for forgetting his name, but he was a punk rocker that got killed in a small town,
yeah,
out in the Midwest, at like a Denny's parking lot because the jocks ran him over, and then do you
right.
remember that?
I do.
Yeah.
I do. I
Yeah.
think there was a documentary about that, or they had made a
Okay.
movie or something. I remember that. Yeah. And it could get, you know,
Was there any situations where it got pretty maybe intense or like physical from like certain people because you were a punk rocker?
yeah.
I assume, yeah.
In school, luckily, I remember one time this one guy that kept kind of on and on and on. And I just decided to stand up for myself one day and did what I did in the hallway and it was my first experience with sticking up for myself on that level to a dude that was bigger than me. But this doesn't happen all the time, this, but he folded, which was kind of exciting. you
Yeah.
he just crumbled the second that he realized that, I wasn't gonna just sit there and, take it. And
Yeah.
so, but I can't say, man, like I said, between that story that you're talking about, people were mostly freaked out by us. So they kept their distance, but skating down the street, looking like we looked, you would hear a lot of stuff get yelled from cars and, dudes and trucks would pull over and act like they wanted to fight. But
Yeah.
as we got older, more and more of us, we're sticking together and we watched out for each other.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And so the band that you started with your buddy, was that a different band than the one you ended up doing like long term?
Yeah. So my parents were so freaked out. Like what I would do is, they didn't know I was in bands. They didn't know I was playing shows or anything like that. I just, I learned how to lie and, keep things pretty close to the chest at an early age. So I would, uh, I would leave the house and have my leather jacket out there because they were starting to get disturbed by that. I had the anti-swastika thing on my jacket. My dad flipped out, not because he's pro swastika, but he's like, "There's a swastika on your
Yeah,
jacket. It's going to cause you problems. Like, what are you doing?"
yeah,
You know,
yeah,
I'm like, "But it's X'd out." But he didn't,
yeah,
he didn't see
yeah,
it that way. He
yeah.
was like, "You
It's
just,
still there. Yeah,
yeah."
yeah. Someone far away may not know. You know what I mean? They'll just
Yeah,
see.
now that
Yeah,
I've gotten older, I
yeah,
got a couple of kids myself. I could
yeah.
see like, hey
Oh,
man,
I would definitely be like, come on. Like to my daughter, I'd be like, come on. There's
yeah,
got to be another pass that you can use. You don't have to use that one. We get it. We get it. We get
right,
it.
right.
Uh,
Another band from the UK, Subhumans. They were really good. Got wind
that's
of them, and
that's my
I don't
favorite.
know. It's just funny how all that happened. Like, how does that music end up in Western Kentucky? I really don't know. But it did. So yeah, I started in high school. I was into I didn't apply myself. I got really into, doing my own thing and partying and all that kind of stuff, but had a lot of teachers tell me you've got a lot of potential. Thomas, you're smart. If you would apply yourself, you could do okay. And I did all right in English and I did okay in they called it social studies. It may be history now, but I remember reading in a history book about these reporters called the muckrakers back in the day, and what they would do is their only job was to rake muck on politicians. So I'm like,
Uh,
there's the band name, the Muckrakers for sure. And so we
nice.
started
Okay.
that little band and covered a lot of exploited stuff and yeah, I played in I sang in a few different just little punk bands along the way. Kind of Descendants wannabe type of bands, like it's all about the Descendants. Let's kind of
Yeah.
do that thing, and just kind of finding my way. And I ended up playing drums in this band called the Dive Bombers, and we were like accidentally sort of Southern punk. It wasn't on purpose. It
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
came out that way. It kind of had like um,
Like Nashville pussy type Southern
yeah, like
like
I ended
punk.
up later on, way after that band was over, hearing this term cowpunk, and I was like, maybe that's
Cowpunk. Yeah.
yeah, kind of what we were doing.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was a fun band. But that's where met my buddy Danny. He played guitar in that band, and he had already started the band Teenage Rehab that I'm still a member of today. It looks a lot different, but it was I'm not trying to be corny, but it's a for real a lifelong thing. Like, we're not quitting. We're not doing like a farewell show. We're just in this band and we play when we can, and we record when we can.
Yeah. I just, for me, when we're talking about punk rock and the influence of punk rock. You had mentioned the Subhumans before, and I just have to say that they're one of my favorite UK bands. But I had gotten into the UK hardcore punk rock. I went through my phases as I learned each genre, regional, just like world, like every aspect. I was digging into everything, and
Yeah,
it was really exciting to go through that process. And for me, in comparison to, I guess, someone that has gotten into punk rock out here, I had looked at it more as sort of, utility for me to change my perceptions and how I grew up a lot, and what I thought about everything, society, people. Yeah, I mentioned it before in previous podcasts that Bad Religion was one of the first bands that I really connected to, and that was my goosebumps moment that you were talking about earlier, where it changed the trajectory of my life completely
yeah,
because it allowed me to see in such a different way. And so I always gravitated towards bands that would challenge me in terms of who I was and how I viewed things. And that's how I always approach punk rock. And so there's a contrast to that, right? Because the contrast is, right, it can fuel that angst, that uncertainty about where you're going, the insecurities that you feel as as a teenager. So if it catches you at a certain time, it can have such a different impact. And I just wanted to delve into that a little bit further because as someone that got into it for those reasons that I'm talking about that were kind of contrasting mine, um, and but it's evolved over time for you. Talk about what it was about the music that fueled that sense and and I guess like just really talk about the misconceptions of that for younger people that end up, thinking that they have to smoke out, they have to drink in order to like go to a show. You know what I mean? Um,
Yeah. Yeah. Like me and you were talking a second ago before we started. Um, at a certain point, probably through recovery, I had to look back and admit that, I had bought the same rock and roll lie that a lot of guys buy, which is, being into punk rock and stuff, I always tried to act like, that I wasn't about that. But looking back, I definitely bought in to, sex, drugs, rock and roll kind of thing. Same thing as like a lot of the rock stars that we didn't want to be anything like. That definitely happened to me.
yeah,
I remember one moment that happened. So Dead Kennedys definitely tested my thinking because I was one and my friends we would read the lyrics, and I learned a lot, and I started learning to think differently from the Dead Kennedys because they would test kind of uh they would test punk, stereotypical punk rock thinking, and I thought that was cool, and I learned Bad Religion was super important to me too, because Bad Religion actually got me to get a dictionary and
yeah,
start looking up words.
yeah. Otherwise, you were confused for the whole song. Yeah,
Right.
I
I'm
did. I
like,
went through the same thing. Yeah, yeah,
yeah. Funny story, in high school, I was you had to do a poetry notebook, and I, as usual, had pushed it to the last minute. And so I just started writing down Bad Religion lyrics. So I stole a bunch of Bad Religion lyrics and turned them in, and the lady's like, "You're really good.
you're amazing.
Where
Yeah,
did you get this stuff?"
that is hilarious.
But I had a moment. This older dude, these 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 few kind of street kid traveling punk rockers ended up in Paducah, and of course, there's not many of us around, so we see each other, and we ended up becoming friends. And I remember Kenny. I don't know where Kenny's at today, but I remember he said something to me one time. He was like, "Hey, I had written. I was still pretty young. I had written like PUNX, like punks, whatever. I don't know what I wrote." And he was like, "Hey, man, punks are supposed to be smart, not stupid." And it stung a little bit, but I was young, and I appreciate him. That was one little moment. I didn't turn my life around, but I always remembered that he said that. He was like, "Listen to the Dead Kennedys, listen to what they're talking about." He was trying to kind of teach me some things instead of this sort of bonehead, destroy your life, kind of thing. And it was just one little moment, but I still remember Kenny saying that to me, and it had an effect on me.
And Kenny was like a gutter punk, like a
Yeah. Yeah, he had
like
traveled, him and
traveling.
his girlfriend and a couple of other people. Again, how they end up in Paducah, I don't know. It's odd, of all places. Maybe they were on the run. I'm not sure, but they
Yeah.
did, and we were friends, and they've since moved on. But yeah, they were just traveling kids, and I don't know, I don't know how they ended up there, but that was a cool experience, and I thought about that a lot. I mean, before we did this, I know I had messaged you, and I would listen to like Minor Threat lyrics, and they're very clear on what they were talking about, but I'm getting smashed. And the thing with me, at least my perception of it and the way I look at it is, I'm an alcoholic. I drink differently than a lot of people. I've seen people drink differently than me. From the beginning. I blacked out. I'm a blackout to the floor drinker, and that's how I am. And then, later on in life, I ended up getting into the opiate scene, and of course that progressed to heroin addiction and everything that goes along with that.
Mm.
Um, so, like I said, man, I got to do a lot of cool stuff, and once I joined teenage rehab, we got signed to a small little label out of Virginia called Jailhouse Records. It was an idea that was started in jail by this guy Dave, who's since passed away. Um, he had his own struggles. But yeah, he put us out. I don't know. We didn't ask a lot of questions. He was like, I want to put you guys out on the road for 60 days. Just boom. And, I got to do a lot of that, but by the time that was going on, I'm in full blown opiate addiction at this point. Like previously, you drink hard and, in my mind, I'm doing good if I'm just like doing some coke on the weekends, drinking, smoking pot every day. That's me doing good. And, I'm younger at that point, so I can maintain, I guess. I was out of the house, doing my own thing and was able to hold a job. And, I was a screen printer. I'm thinking, okay, so what can I do that will apply to what I really like to do? Print t-shirts. So I borrowed some money from my grandfather and bought some screen printing equipment and kind of tried to make it that way, playing in a band and print t-shirts. And I worked for from different screen printing places. But before that tour, I remember thinking we knew a few months out, and I'm like, how am I going to get enough dope to go on tour for 2 months? It's going to be, so I entered my first methadone clinic when I was 24 years old. Because I knew I was in over my head and I was not wanting to get sober, but I was wanting to get off of opiates. That just like a lot of drugs, the way I respond to them, I fell in love with cocaine. And it turned on me, but I kept doing it, But when the opiate thing happened for me, it was kind of like another chill bump, magical experience. I was like, man, I don't have the agitation of the coke. I don't have the smell of the alcohol, and I feel as comfortable in my skin as I've ever felt. Like I love it.
What was the response from the people that were around you at that time? It seems like it would be a pretty drastic change in, I guess, like behavior, like seeing you a certain way, nodding out or, whatever.
So I'll say, man, my close buddies at that time, they didn't, especially my bandmates, me and one of the other guys, we drank a lot and we did a lot of partying. But as far as like starting to go over into that area, I hid it from him. At least in my own mind, I did. Now he eventually, a couple of years into this, checked me, and out of love, and it didn't get me sober at the moment, but I remember it and I appreciate it. So the tight friends I had at that time did not do that. So I had started developing other friends, acquaintances. And I would kind of do that, and then I would put on this other show around my close friends. So I somehow, some way rounded up enough methadone to get me through a 2-month tour, and I did it. Super sketchy, going through El Paso, Texas, in a loaded down van with Kentucky plates at 3 o'clock in the morning, going through a checkpoint with 2 months worth of dope on you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I made it, somehow, some way. But yeah, man, eventually it started to show. And, my bandmates, they're still a couple of my best friends today. I talk to them all the time. They tried to talk to me, but at the same time, we let each other sort of be who we were. And I think the thinking was, I can't speak for them, but Thomas will get out of this, and they didn't know the extent to what I was doing. They definitely didn't know once I crossed the line over just shooting heroin, sticking needles in my arms and stuff. That was like, any good friend of mine would have, let me have it if they knew that I was doing that. So what I do is I start pulling away from all my friends, and over time, my word had very little value. It's like Thomas will show up in the beginning, and then as time goes on, it's like maybe he'll show up, and then people just quit asking because they know I'm not coming, unless I've got what I need. So I pulled away from all the people that I was closest to, and started, running with other people, doing other things.
And you're still in this relatively small town,
Yeah.
right?
So
So
when Oxycontin was huge. I think on the news they call it hillbilly heroin. We never called it that. It's
right,
just dope, whatever. But the Oxycontin pain pill thing was huge. It decimated, you know, a lot of places. It definitely hit hard in Kentucky, all
what
of
what
Kentucky.
what year was this?
This is probably, I mean, I'm in the thick of it, starting in 2003. I'm
Okay.
right in the middle of that. I entered my first methadone clinic. I was like, oh shit, I'm sick all the time. This is not what I wanted. I didn't want to be, I didn't want to be a junkie. I didn't think I was ever going to get physically addicted, but I woke
Right.
up one morning, I didn't have what I needed. And I was like, oh shit, I'm sick. I'm sick. This is the sick that I keep hearing about from other
Wow.
people.
What's
Um,
not to make you relive it or anything, just
no, it's
because
all good.
I've smoked sherm, I've smoked crack.
Yeah.
I mean, I've done DMT. I mean, I did DMT for different reasons, but back in the
Yeah.
day,
Yeah.
I never did heroin, and it was because I mean I did methamphetamine when I was 14 years old, and I got addicted, and it's crazy to think that I had the worst experience that you could ever imagine the first time that I ever did it. I was paranoid out of my mind, thought I was being chased by
Right.
someone, I
Right.
was gonna be murdered.
Yeah.
And I just continued to do it. It's absolute insanity. But what stopped me from doing heroin was I was at a sort of meth house, but they had some heroin addicts living in one of the rooms. And for some reason, I just peeked in because it was always dark and gloomy and they were gone. And I peeked in and there was this pungent smell that I cannot even describe to you.
Like
But
death.
yeah,
Yeah.
it felt like, and I felt the poking needle of death. Like it was death and I could feel the poke. And it was just this really trippy thing. And I think it was probably for a good reason because, like you, being a recovering addict and being um, just, I have a very addictive personality that I know if I ever would have touched that, I don't know what came over me to be like in that moment because I was only 14 years old at this time. That when I got to prison, people were hey, you got to try. No, I never did it. And it was
Yeah.
because of that moment. So I don't know what it feels like to be like dope sick or like that first shot where you end up getting, where you start throwing up. But
Yeah.
what is that, if you can vocalize what that feels like, to not have the thing that you're so dependent on?
The dope sickness itself.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I heard a lady recently describe it really well. She said the addict brain is a relief-seeking missile. And I was like, oh shit. Yeah, that's pretty good. By any means necessary. I even using over the years, I remember a couple of people that when we weren't able to get anything, we couldn't hustle anything up, nothing to steal, all the stuff. They would accept that we weren't getting anything today. I could not do it,
Wow.
relentless, and just absolutely petrified, of the sickness, that I was about to, have to go through. And for me, in the beginning, what opiates did for me, um, I've known some dudes that are addicts, alcoholics, maybe, but opiates never sit well with them. In the beginning, they make me up. I mean, they light me up. I eventually, you do heroin long enough, you end up being slumped. You're the slump
Right.
dude,
Yeah.
but not in the beginning. Even heroin in the beginning, it like, and I've always liked to go.
Wow. Yeah.
Um,
Same.
I
That's why I liked
had a long
cocaine too.
yeah, long run
Yeah.
with speed myself.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
another thing that just
Yeah.
decimated Kentucky. Methamphetamine,
Mm.
it's a huge thing, and did a lot of that. A lot of people went to prison and for that, and then then the pain pill thing really started going, at least, for me. Uh, and I got into the Oxycontin thing, and then I was snorting those, and then they changed the formula. That was Big Pharma's response to the opioid epidemic that they had fueled. I'm not going to say caused, but certainly fueled. They changed the formula where you couldn't snort them, you couldn't shoot them. And then, like clockwork, man, everybody that was already shooting and snorting heroin just comes to Paducah, Kentucky. And I'm a terrible drug dealer. I found that out. I like to do them. I don't like to sell them. I don't want you to have them.
It's a lot of responsibility and like work. It's not
Yeah.
easy.
So I was thinking at one point I had to get creative. So I met some people that were from Chicago, and I got to, I would drive there and try not to get killed. It's just a blessing that I didn't. Some super, real deal shit. What's to stop these guys from just taking my money and leaving me for dead somewhere? What
Right.
stopped them? Whatever it was, I'm appreciative. But yeah, I got to doing that. Got to going back and forth from Chicago and trying to sell. I never had dreams of being like a rich drug dealer and having a bunch of stuff. I just had dreams of having enough dope, and I tried to do that. But eventually, man, what happens is I'm coming home with the money that I've rounded up myself and from other people to go pick up, and I'm coming back and I don't have their stuff,
Yeah.
and that makes people mad. And so what ended up happening for me through my addiction, man, is I became um, nothing but a problem, even in the drug world. I don't have a hustle. I don't have any money. It's like when you're trying to hustle and get dope all the time and stuff, you got to bring something to the table. And it got to the point for me where I had nothing to bring to the table. And it got pretty dark. I remember I tried to move, what we say in recovery, geographical change. I tried to move. If I get out of Paducah for a variety of reasons, I got people mad at me and I need a change.
Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe that'll help. And it didn't. I ended up getting a couple of DUIs, unresponsive at the wheel. So I wasn't actually in the act of driving either time, which is kind of interesting. But, the last one I got, I went out at the wheel and rear-ended this lady that had 3 kids in the car. And, she left the scene, and it's all kind of hazy because I was so out of it. And I was in my drug-addled mind, I was thinking, well, she left the scene because she's got dope and she don't want to deal with the cops either. So cool. What ended up happening in the police report is says she left the scene because she was scared.
Wow.
And I don't know exactly what that means, but I don't think she was lying. They ended up picking me up down the road, and I'd like to tell you that was like some, it was a moment, but it wasn't this moment that got me sober.
Yeah.
It took a little while longer. And I remember my girlfriend at the time, that's a long time ago. I'm since married and got 2 beautiful kids and a beautiful wife, but she left, and I'm sitting there by myself. She left. She struggled too, and she left and did what she had to do because I had nothing to offer. And she did what she had to do, and I was living in a house that her mom owned. And I remember her mom saying, like, Thomas, I like you, but she left and you got to go somewhere. And my parents had I didn't have parents that were like the meal ticket. Don't get me wrong, I definitely hustled them out of some money along the way. But as far as looking at my parents as a place that I can go or they're going to help me out, that was long gone. That ship had sailed, and I'd pulled away from all my friends. So what I was facing was real homelessness, like what we call dead ass homeless, like real, not couch surfing. There's no couch to surf. You got a big problem on your hands.
You burned all your bridges at that point.
Yeah, all of them.
Yeah.
So I tried to drink my way through that and kind of summon up the strength for one more hustle, one more move. Just thinking crazy stuff like, man, if I could just get like $1,000 somehow, some way, I could restart my life. And eventually, man, what I found is, smoking crack again alone and all the things that go along with that. And I remember being about 4:30 in the morning, the birds start chirping outside, and I got tears running down my face, about the way that I'm living my life. And I remember it got pretty dark. I remember thinking, if this is going to be my life, I'm not interested. And I'd never been suicidal before. And I remember looking over at the ground, and there's a belt over there, as there usually is in any, needle junkie's house. I'm thinking, man, what I could probably do is maybe call my boy, see if he'll front me a few Xanax bars. I'll get sleepy and I'll wrap that shit around my neck and get this over with. And I'd never felt that way before. And it scared me. So I flipped out, tore a bunch of shit up in the house. I got really,
Were you under the influence of something when you had those thoughts? And then how old were you
yeah,
at this point?
I was 34 years old
34.
this
Okay.
time. Yeah. Never been to treatment before, never interested in sobriety. Definitely interested in getting off of certain drugs.
Yeah.
I knew the heroin life was bad. I knew that. I didn't need any treatment center to tell me heroin's bad. I knew that, but I didn't know what was wrong with me. And so yeah, I was under the influence of all different kinds of stuff. When I ended up in detox, they asked me what I was using, and I was like, heroin. And they're like, well, you tested for a lot more. You got cocaine, amphetamines, alcohol, opiates.
So you had that moment of wanting to suicidal ideation, like, well, maybe a little bit beyond that, but like,
Yeah,
where you looked at the belt and you're like, man, I could take some bars and then
yeah.
just fucking take yourself out. So in that moment, is that when you decided to detox or to go into treatment?
So the first thing I did was started punching holes in the walls, throwing shit around the house, freaking out.
Yeah,
Said a
having a
bunch of wild
breakdown.
stuff to whatever God I thought might be listening, and it wasn't pleasant,
Hmm.
stuff that I was brought up you don't say, to somebody. And then I cried. And then what really scared me is then I went blank, like not out of it. I just, uh, smarter people than me might call it catatonic, just like everything went. And I was thinking, man, what happens to a dude that gets lower than this? This must be where suicide happens, because I've never been this low internally. I'd lived in rough places and, I've been dope sick before, but something, when I say low, I mean on the inside, not on the outside. I've lost relationships before and always hurts and stuff, but it wasn't about stuff. It wasn't about being financially broke, had nothing to do with that. It was something. That's the best word I can use for it. Something on the inside.
Yeah, something. Definitely
Yeah,
something.
something. Yeah. So I did, my little thing is I did what tough guys like me do, and I called my mom,
Yeah. Wow.
in the end. And I said, Mom, I think I'm having a nervous breakdown. I need some help.
Mm.
Um, that's the only thing I could describe as what was going on was a nervous breakdown. And she said, I'm on the way. She'd been waiting on that call for every bit of 15, 20 years easily.
Wow.
And they showed up, and I was like, damn, they showed up quick. And then I
Wow.
started in again. The addict brain starts kicking back in again. I'm like, well, if you guys could give me like $100,
Wow.
tomorrow, tomorrow I'll go. I got some, affairs I got to get in order and all that stuff.
Yeah.
They looked at
Yeah.
my house. There's nothing
Yeah.
to do.
Yeah.
Not, I said my house. It's not even my house.
Yeah.
They looked
Wow.
at the house I was living in, and they said, why don't you just, they brought what I call the X factor. They brought my little sister. She showed up when I was 17. She was a surprise.
Wow.
And, whether they did it on purpose or not doesn't make any difference. I was not going to show out in front of her. I didn't want to do that. She'd seen enough. What, I was 17, I was out of the house, and she was born. So as she got older, a lot of guilt around that.
Yeah.
What she remembers was the worst. So they brought her, and I remember looking over at her and I was like, okay, let's go. So they got me
Wow.
into a detox facility, which was, they got me a grant bed at a detox facility. And about, 3 days into that, I called my mom and she said, we found a place. Are you willing to go? And I couldn't come up with a better idea, is the truth.
Mm.
If I would have had $50, I don't know if I'd be here today because I would have spent it. Because where I was in detox, I could smell the dope.
Yeah, there's probably more there than there is anywhere else.
Yeah, I mean, right
Right.
outside, I could have gone and got into something, but I was nothing but a problem.
Yeah.
There wasn't a lot of people in detox. It was like, hey, you want to get out of here and let me get you high for free? It doesn't work like that typically.
Right. Yeah.
So I can't say it was for any like super spiritual reasons. It was that I didn't have a better idea and I didn't have another lie to tell. So I said, all right. And they took me to Discovery Place, and I had no idea. I'd never been to treatment. I had no idea what I was getting into. I'm like, is this place gonna be rough? So they're gonna, am I gonna have to fight? I don't know. Are there gonna be razor wire and dudes lifting weights out in the front yard, pit bulls and barrel fires, or
Yeah.
I didn't know.
Yeah.
Or on the flip side, is this going to be like church camp? Like what am I about to get into? What's going on? And yeah, I was still pretty sick, man. I'd been, in and out of methadone clinics and all the other substances in my body for there wasn't a day of no opiates that of my choosing in 10, 12 years. I'm not going to tell you there wasn't a day or two I couldn't round something up, but
Yeah.
Methadone really hangs on too. So I was sick for a couple of months, really. I mean,
Wow. A couple months.
yeah. So 1 week of detox was just the beginning.
And you're not even really being able to process really what is going on in that moment of like the future, about like what you want.
No,
Right? Like I can't imagine that you're thinking clearly that way.
no, it's a
Like
trip.
that. Yeah.
I was desperate enough though to say yes. I remember calling Danny and Alex, my buddies from teenage rehab that I played with for years, and I
Yeah.
thought it was going to be this big thing. I was like, guys, I got to go to treatment, and they were like, yeah, man.
The irony is not lost on me either. The name of your band,
Right.
and being in it, but yeah. And did they show up for you? Like in
They
the way
did.
yeah.
They and they have
That's amazing.
still. I just talked to both the guys last night. Alex has been the drummer of the Queers for the last 10 years.
Well, that's one of my
Yeah.
favorite bands. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
great.
they were
Yeah.
really good to us out on they for whatever reason, man, they took these three dudes from Western Kentucky that were playing punk rock, and they were like, yeah, come
Yeah.
on the road with us. And
Oh, that's great.
Joe's a good friend of mine. He's sober. That's probably why Joe's been able to continue doing this punk rock thing well into his 60s, is because he didn't he ended up
Yeah.
getting sober. So
Yeah.
he was really good to us. Alex and them are out on tour now, and Danny's doing something else called Dead Nuts, a great band out of Paducah, Kentucky. It's
So bring me back. So they showed up, and then you're like going through that process. It took you three months of fully detox.
Well, I wouldn't say fully detox, but I'll be honest with you, man. I was talking to a dude at my work today. He was asking me what he was about to get into. He wanted to
Yeah.
know. And I was like, man, I'll put it to you like this: I felt progressively better for a whole year. I'm not telling you I felt terrible for a year, but over a period of a year, I remember like some people at work when I was a guest there at Discovery Place. They're like, Thomas, what are you doing, man? I'm like, I was kind of like staring off and up at the tree, and I was like, I haven't seen a tree and I haven't looked at one
Yeah,
in 20, 25 years. I don't
yeah,
know. I mean, I was
yeah.
like, I know that sounds like some hippie shit or whatever, but I'm telling you, man, I hadn't been here. You
Yeah.
know?
You sounded like that dude from Trailer Park Boys for a second when you said that.
Yeah.
Shit. But I mean, I definitely feel what you're saying. I mean, not only like being out of prison and not having gone back and having my freedom taken away, but like being sober, completely sober, and just focused on my my physical body and making sure that I'm maintaining that, I'm being healthy spiritually. I do that shit all the time where I'm staring at a
Yeah.
tree. I'm just
Yeah.
like I'm just happy to be here to witness what is going on. So I understand that sentiment so much, and
Yeah.
it's a beautiful thing to be able to achieve that because even people that are not, and this is the thing about I think recovery and for people that have been to prison is that you you appreciate everything and all the little things, all the things that people are driving by, all the things that people are passing by, that everybody's got their head down, they're looking at something else, no one's paying attention. There's something about that recovery and that journey that allows you to take it all in and absorb it and really appreciate the beauty that we actually have in front of us, and that trickles
Yeah.
over into our friendships and our family.
Absolutely, man.
But you didn't get there right away. Did you get there right away, or you?
Well, early on, I didn't know it, but I thought I was just pissed.
Just FYI, sorry. We were on the 10-minute mark on my thing, so we might be getting cut off. So we'll have to
Okay.
just whenever we do, just if you can. I'm terrible at remembering where we cut
You're
off.
good.
All right, cool.
At first, man, I was scared. I didn't know I was scared. I thought I was just pissed. I was pretty standoffish to everybody. Everybody was cool to me. They were really welcoming, but I'm walking up the sidewalk and I'm scanning the scene. I'm trying to find out like who I might relate to, who I don't like. I've never even talked to him, but I definitely don't like that dude. He
Yeah.
might be cool, and I'm like the Terminator. I'm just like analyzing, because I'm afraid. I didn't know that at the time. I learned that in recovery is that anger is a secondary emotion to fear, and fear always comes
Right.
first.
Yeah.
And so I'm trying to like I got my body language a certain way, and I'm trying to like act like I'm not scared and not worried about anything. And it was just so foreign to me, completely foreign to me. People smiling and this thing at first, the only thing I knew to do was to judge it,
Hmm.
and I would kind of like character assassinate people and be like, this dude's whatever. At least in my own head, I had a lot of conversations with myself.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
And nobody, they just kept on just, Thomas, how you doing, man? How you doing? Come on, let's go to group. And, luckily for me, man, Discovery Place is a nonprofit 12-step spiritual retreat. It's really not a treatment center. It's not a
Mm.
medical facility. I had gotten, medically cleared to go there. And I started noticing these dudes kind of laughing, and I wasn't buying that at first, but I started asking them questions to see if they really use the way I used, and there's a language in this, you could probably tell if a dude's really been to prison or not, if he's bullshitting you,
Yeah.
or if
Yeah.
he's really been down a certain road or not, and I was asking these dudes questions and it was adding up. I was like, yeah, they've been there, but they're somewhere else now. I don't know how that happened.
Was it more so you were trying to think, okay, if they haven't been what I've gone through, I can't get to that laughter, that happiness. But like
Yeah.
asking that and then finding out, oh shit, they have been down that same path that I have.
Yeah.
It's possible. Is that
Yes.
what was okay, gotcha.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah.
So over time, man, I had to go. Like I did 30 days there. Some of it's a blur, some of it is not. I had some moments that I still remember today that are very important to me. I had to go finish up, some jail time from the DUI and the hit and run and all that kind of stuff. And I got out of jail and
I just how much time did you have to do when you went to jail?
Just 45 days, and I'd
Just
done half of it before I went to treatment. So,
gotcha.
nothing,
Okay.
nothing extreme or anything like
Gotcha.
that. I've been in and out of county jails over the years for
Gotcha.
minor stuff, but never did
Okay.
any big time.
Okay.
But I got out and I was thinking, man, it's almost like a fork in the road kind of thing because they let me out as they do at some odd time and give you no warning. I was glad to go, and I was thinking, man, I could probably, I'm kind of back in my hometown or nearby. I know some people out here. I could probably make a phone call and get somebody to pick me up and get back at it, or I could go back to Discovery Place. They told me to come back,
Mm.
and I went back.
Wow.
And they ended up I lived in, this is not everybody's story, I lived in a halfway house for the first 3 years of my recovery, because that's what it was for me.
So when you came out of the county jail and you had that moment, I could go over here and maybe cop or go back to the Discovery Place. It was as simple as saying, no, I'm gonna go do that other thing.
Yeah,
What
I mean, a funny little thing happened. I was walking down the road and kind of thinking about that, and I heard this lady's voice. She was like, Thomas? And I looked over and there's a little used car lot in the middle of Western Kentucky. And it's this lady I used to work with at a screen printing shop years ago.
wow.
I swear. And
Wow. Okay.
she was like, what's going on? I was like, I just got out of jail. And she was like, well, you need anything? I was like, yeah, I need a cigarette. And she's like, okay, here's a cigarette. And she was like, you need to use the phone? And I was like, yeah, yeah. And I called my parents and I said, yeah, they just let me out. I need to go back. And they were like, all right. So they took me back. Discovery Place put me back up for another week to help me get, figure out where I was going to go and what I was going to do. And they hooked me up with a halfway house down the road. There was, I don't know, 20, 25 dudes, pretty big halfway house. And I started adjusting there, man. It still took time. Like I noticed I wouldn't move in over at the halfway house. I would keep all my clothes in this little luggage that my parents had given me so I could just grab and go at any given moment. I was thinking about that. Something may come up. I may have to get out of here because I was still pretty uncomfortable, and not just on a like coming off drugs kind of uncomfortable. Like I was in a brand new world around people that I didn't know, and I was struggling socially big
Yeah.
time. And the guys were good to me, man. I ended up making good friends there, but the first few months, and I certainly don't want this to discourage anybody that may be thinking about getting sober or going through getting sober, but they weren't all bad days. But some of the days were long, man. And early on, I really didn't get involved in recovery. At first, I tried to kind of tough guy this thing. All right, I'm living in a halfway house. Don't drink, don't use, and just get my head to the pillow tonight. Hopefully, I'll get sleepy so I can go to sleep and try it again tomorrow and kind of endure another day. And that got old, and I ended up asking a guy to sponsor me, which was super awkward for me. I was like, man, they tell me I need to get a sponsor. Are you taking sponsees? He's like, yeah, man, start calling me every day. So every day, what the hell am I supposed to say on the phone to a dude I barely know?
Yeah.
Everything was just super foreign to me. But I did that. And I bonded with this guy because he, at first glance, I wouldn't have known this, but he had seen Black Flag live, and he made me laugh. He was one of the first dudes that had been where I had been and was somehow not there anymore.
Yeah.
And he was
Yeah.
still very relatable. He seemed, I had never been sober, so I didn't know what sober was. I thought I was going to have to be super straight laced or be this guy that I couldn't be, and I didn't know if like people were into punk rock and were sober. I didn't know.
Yeah.
I didn't know anything. Like I said, I thought I was maybe going to some kind of church camp or whatever. And,
Oh,
if it's your
yeah,
thing, nothing
yeah.
against that. But I got desperate enough that even if that's what it was, I had to go.
Yeah, I mean it's kind of hard, right? Like if that's the way that you were thinking at that time, and so much of who you were or are is tied to that identity, to
Right.
that person, and to that culture, and you think that's the only thing that is going on, that
Yeah.
you can't even imagine that, oh wait, no, there might be people that are into the scene that might not be connected, but and I think that's kind of that's one of the fears I think that we have, is that we're going to lose a sense of, I guess, who we are, because
Yeah.
for one, even to go into, I think, recovery, because so much is is that part of the fear of losing that part of us, that attachment to that identity.
Yeah.
And maybe you could speak on this, and this is just me just going off the top of my head, but I mean, I think all these things are really relatable to, drug addiction, and people that have come out of prison that have lived a certain lifestyle. Is that so we're so tied into the identity, right? Especially when it's rooted at a teenage level. And then we get stuck in that cycle of thinking, and like to be able to get out of that almost takes a mental breakdown, if you will, like what you went
Right.
through, what I went through. I had a mental breakdown in a prison cell, and whatever happened allowed me to really deconstruct and empty out everything that I thought I was. But there was so much fear that came with that. And I think that's where people end up not going and following and going to the other side, is because they're still so yeah, talk a little bit more about that connection to that identity. And
So I remember talking to this guy that I asked to help me, and I said, man, my life's getting better. My parents are just like, they're super happy. I'm starting to talk to my sister. I mean, things are getting better, but I'm wanting to go back. I don't know what's wrong with me. What am
mm,
I going back to? Nobody's asking me to come back. Nobody's like, you can stay at my place. Nobody was calling. And anybody that cared about me, they were like, yeah, dude, you just stay where you're at. And he was like, he helped me understand that we gravitate toward what's familiar, even if what's familiar is miserable, you
right,
know.
yeah,
And I had developed, like we all do, I developed a character over the years, and he's about this and he's not about that, and he responds this way and he doesn't. And we get guys that are coming out of prison to Discovery Place, and I relate to that. And one of the things is like, the skills, you did what you had to do. We all did what we had to do. It's not about like bashing my past and the character that I created. I did what I had to do. I did the best that I could with what I had at the time. And especially guys coming out of prison, the skills and the way you go about things, you got to do what you got to do. You know, uh, what we want to do is, when you get out of there, is teach you how to stay out of there. And the recidivism rate is just unbelievable.
yeah.
I'm not coming back, and they're like, yeah, we'll see you back. And
They want to, yeah, that's their paycheck is, they want you
yeah,
to come back. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And it's it's not set up very well either. Once you get in, it's very easy to go back. So I had to take a look at the character that I developed, at a very early age. And it's not a good look, man. When you're still trying to navigate life with the same tools you developed when you were 15 and you're 35 years old. Not only is it not a good look, it's not working, and that boat's not going to float the rest of the way. And I had to come to terms with that. So not only, you were talking about, maybe there are people that are in the scene that are doing what I'm doing. There's that, and I did find that out. And I also found out, like, maybe I could also be friends with some people that I would normally be standoffish with. You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
I learned that I had a whole lot of very childish, kind of social skills, at 35. And, I'm still growing in that department. I've been sober a little bit over nine years now. hopefully I stay sober, and I'll
Congratulations.
have 10 years in January, which doesn't make me a bit better than anybody or less than anybody. Um, but I had to take a look. It's what the old timers in the recovery community will, the first time they did it to me, it pissed me off. They kind of grin. I'm like, how's that working out for you, man? And it seems like a sarcastic kind of irritating question, but I remember the first time that I thought about that later on at night by myself. And I remember that question going on in my head. How's your operating system for life? How's it working out for you, man?
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
it wasn't,
Yeah.
so that's where asking somebody to help me has been so like important. I I think that most successful people, no matter how you define success, even if you define it as financially, whatever, most of those people have a counsel in their life.
Mhm.
And,
A
and I think
mentor,
yeah.
as counselor, yeah. Mhm.
And a guy that I look up to a lot, he talks about the importance of having a mentor in your life, whether you call that a sponsor or a spiritual advisor or a
Mhm.
mentor or an older brother or whatever. I think that we've kind of gotten away from that, and I don't know, why that is exactly. I certainly had never really, outside of my dad, which I had a really tumultuous relationship with. I didn't have anybody. I had a couple of people along the way, but I didn't have anybody that really showed me how to navigate things. And I wasn't really interested in having anybody until I was, until I
Yeah,
was able to admit that it's not working out for me, man. I need some help.
yeah. And I think to add on to that, I think that there has maybe potentially always been that part of you that wanted that. Well, like
Yeah.
for me, like going through that process is this of, gang life when I was younger, not having my dad really fully in my life. Because I was going to ask you earlier, it seems that you had a good support system, although you said that you had a tumultuous relationship with your dad. Um, and looking back and you reflecting on that now, what what would you say to, I guess, the younger you with that type of knowledge that you had prior to you going down that? Because you must have felt some sense, right? Like when you were younger, like not feeling maybe connected to your dad. And you don't have to answer this as well, because I know it's kind of like a personal thing. But for me, I've done so much work in that capacity of trying to understand myself a little bit deeper and realizing that, a lot of my choices were made that um from that child's perspective, or that, that outlook. And you touched on a little bit earlier, and then you get stuck in that, and you sort of perceive and feel emotions that are actually related to incidences and events in your life when you were younger, and
Yeah.
they carry over. And if you never process that, you can be stuck in a loop cycle, and you could be one of those dudes that just never gets out of it.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, one of I don't know that I ever consciously thought about it, but since getting sober and doing some reflecting over the years and kind of looking back, it's kind of like my my system was push it down, move on, go. Um, I don't, it doesn't get to me, compartmentalize, put that in a little box and stuff that way back in the back of your
Mhm.
head and move on.
Yeah.
And I never consciously thought about it, but looking back, it's kind of like this tough guy kind of way of doing things. It's like the Rambo approach, I call it.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
that's cool for a movie,
For a
but
movie, for a 2 hour
yeah,
movie. Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
I grew up watching that stuff,
Same,
and
same.
and
Yeah.
it's all good and it makes for a great action movie. Turns out Rambo's not real and I'm not in
Yeah.
a movie, man. This is
Yeah.
my life and it's
Yeah.
not working,
Yeah.
and really looking back, it's like my idea of what a man is, or what the manly thing to do is, has changed a lot. The toughest thing that I ever did in my life was walk up to another man that I didn't know very well and say, man, could you help me? I'm
Mhm.
struggling, you
Right.
know, um,
Yeah.
harder than getting sober, harder than coming off of heroin, harder than coming off of methadone and all the other stuff. by far for me. It was very, very difficult, and I almost didn't do it. I almost didn't, man. Um,
Wow.
Simultaneously, it's the most beneficial thing I've ever done in my entire life. Like today, something's happened for me. I'm not particularly smart. I, I'm not, I barely graduated high school. I was a screen printer. Those are my skills, and somehow, some way, like now I got married when I was 40 years old. I have two kids now. I'm a good father. I'm always
Yeah.
trying to learn how to be better. But I'm a pretty good dad, and my kids love me, and they got a great relationship with my parents,
Sweet.
and I'm the executive director of Discovery Place now, which is I'm trying to do better. I'm learning about myself. I'm trying to do better at not being embarrassed about telling you that.
Yeah.
It's like I always want to, anytime I always say, like, if you want to watch an addict or an alcoholic squirm, give them a compliment, you
Mm-hmm.
know.
Yeah.
And that's certainly the case for me. Like, man, you're
That's
the executive director of Discovery Place. That's awesome. Yeah, well, they screwed up and they
yeah,
hired me.
yeah.
You know,
Minimize any
yeah,
achievements that yeah.
yeah, for sure. So, it's not about blowing my own horn. It's like recovery has worked really, really well for a guy like me.
Yeah. And it's okay to be proud of your achievements that you work towards, right? Like
Yeah.
that you are like consciously working towards that you're just trying to obtain that higher self of who you really are. And when you're actually following that path, I think that like guard comes down a little bit. It's just the authenticity factor of it. When you're vulnerable, being authentic around everyone,
Yeah.
you see that. Like we have this ability to see our behaviors, right? Like there's this observer to what we're doing, our higher self. And when we're not there, we know it. And that's when we start to do the manipulation and all those things. But when you're authentic and you're being vulnerable, it's amazing the connections you can have with other people. And getting back to what you were talking about earlier with the having a mentor, where that or having someone older to guide, right? Like, and I think that for people like us that have grown up in environments where we didn't have that, we understand how crucial that is, especially being a father, because that's what I want to do for my 11-year-old daughter Aria
Yeah.
is guide her to show her and not, because there's a tendency now that like kids, they're looking for external sources to find guidance, through social media and what their friends are. But I feel that yeah, at a certain point there was, even when I was younger, when I was in my gang life or my prison life. And I was actually just having this conversation with that dude right there, who's Twig, who's had been down since 1980, where he's at. Like the youngsters they don't want to listen. He like tries to impart wisdom to them. They don't care. There's a disconnect going on. And sometimes I feel like, yeah, it's our responsibility to kind of step up and reconnect to that aspect of humanity because we know the importance of what that means to have guidance and when you don't have guidance. And so how does that look for you now? So how did you get to be the executive director of Discovery Place? How did that happen? Because so you went, it was like 30, you said 35. You were
Yeah, 35. I go back. They helped me get settled in, helped me find a halfway house down the road. And, I had no money, no car, no license. My parents did put me up in that halfway house and like, okay, we're gonna get you started for this month. And they got me a little flip phone and that they set me up. And it was my choice on what I was going to do with that. And, so I'm, in my mind, this idea, like I'm not blaming where I'm from, but in certain areas, defeat just gets on you, and you're like, I'm not going to make it. I just need to go back to, I'm not going to ever be anything but what I am. I'm not going to get out of this, really. I had a lot of voices going on in my head and a lot of negativity. And I'm thinking, okay, I got no car, no license, and I got to get a job. In order to get a job, I got to have a car and a license. So, this is not going to work out. How's this going to work out? And it put me in a position where I had to ask people to help me. Hey man, can you give me a ride to work? Well, the first thing that happened is a dude I was living with at the time at the halfway house. He said, I heard you're looking for a job. I said, yeah. And he was like, all right, we start at 4 o'clock in the morning. I was like, okay. So I started doing landscaping with this guy, which I don't particularly like landscaping,
Yeah.
but it was offered to me, and he was good to me, and he paid me cash, and I started getting a little bit of money in my pocket. Had a guy take me down to the food stamp office, got some food stamps, started learning how to go to the grocery store and be relatively smart with that,
Yeah.
and I remember starting to get free at that point. Like I remember being in the grocery store by myself, going to buy myself some food, and I was like, man, I don't know that I've ever felt this free before. Like, this is incredible. I'm buying myself food, and I'm going to take it home and I'm going to cook it for myself.
Yeah.
That's a big deal
Yeah.
for a guy like me. I hadn't lived like that in a really long time. It's just, eat dope and figure it out. I did that for years. Um, and then I really, really wanted to work at Discovery Place. Something had happened for me, and I fell in love with the place. And I was like, man, if I could just get on, out there, whatever, third shift, second shift, kitchen, whatever, if they just give me something, man. So I put a job application in, and they hired me on second shift out there. And
Wow.
I was walking down the road one day in downtown Dixon, Tennessee is where we're at, small little town, and not looking for a job interview or anything like that. And I looked over and I saw this little screen printing shop, and I was like, what do I got to lose? I need a job. I'll just go in and see if they need somebody. And I walked in and told the dude, I was like, hey, I'm looking for work. I got experience, and I need part-time work. And so he asked me some questions to see if I knew what I was talking about. And he could tell I was experienced in screen printing. He was like, man, this is odd. I was like, what? He's like, well, my head screen printer just left a few days ago, and I got really pissed at him. And I said, there's not experienced screen printers walking down the road looking for a job. And here you are.
Yeah.
And that really happened, man. And, I'm not trying to be corny or anything like that. That happened. And I call those little breadcrumbs, like you're on the right path. Just keep going.
That's serendipitous.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I worked part-time there, part-time at Discovery Place, and I just stayed, man, and ended up getting on full-time days out there at Discovery Place as a guide. That's the word we use instead of counselor or case manager. We use the term guide because we've been where you've been, we know the territory, and we're going to show you how to get out of there. And that's why we use that term. And that was a really, really big deal for me in my own mind. It was a very prestigious, it was like an honor for me to be able to guide men and speak to their families about where they're at and guide them through this process of getting out of where they were. And I did that for, 7 or 8 years, man. And
so you had mentioned that wasn't necessarily a skill set that you had or that was inherent to you. Like you said, they were like relatively, standoffish, or maybe not shy, but just in terms of like speaking. Was it because you were passionate about, and it was obvious you were passionate about that place changing your life, that you wanted to work there and be a part of it? Did that help you get past that part of you that was like,
yeah, I always once the first couple of months kind of wore off and I kept hanging around, I did really, I noticed about myself that I enjoyed sitting down with guys that I love the dudes that are pissed about being there. I love the dudes that what we say is if you can spot it, you got it, and I started learning that I was pretty good at de-escalating guys that were having a really hard time. And that felt good. guys that were getting ready to bolt. Some bolt no matter what you do, but I started finding out like maybe getting some dignity, a little bit. Like, man, I'm kind of doing good at this. They think so, that they asked me if I wanted full-time days now. They're wanting me to like talk to these guys as they come in. They're giving me guys to guide through this process. I found out I was decent at talking to families, and calming families down. And, and that's through the help of a sponsor in my case, or a mentor, somebody that's been where I've been and found a way out. So I just kind of fell in love with that process.
Yeah. And so you had did that up into the point. So how did you become the executive director of it?
Well, September of last year, the previous executive director, he had been there for 20 years, and he had been kind of prepping me. He said, "Man, when I'm done here, I think you're the guy for the job. So we'll see what happens." And he stepped down and suggested me, and they said, "Okay, let's do it." So that's been a whole new learning process. Put a lot of pressure on myself at first, and start thinking I have power that I don't have. And, so but it's been really, really cool, man. I still walk around the property and meet with guys and
I have
do groups with them.
Yeah. So are you executive director? Are you in charge of like programming and coming up with certain, I don't know, like groups, or is that your process? Is that what you have to do?
Yeah.
Okay.
So coming up with generally, we're pretty dialed in on like what the general outline is. But what I try to concentrate on is the culture out there, and the goal doesn't happen all the time, but what we're always reaching for is whether a dude's into getting sober or not, whether he likes what we're talking about or not. What I want him to do is when he leaves, whenever that is, whether it's three months or 1 month or 6 months, whatever, I want him to say those dudes treated me well, because the truth of it is, the old executive director, he said, "Come on, we're going to make some beds." I was like, "All right." So we're getting beds ready for the new guys. And he's like, "This is one of the most important jobs on this property." And I thought he was joking. I kind of laughed. And he was like, "No, I'm not joking at all." He's like, "This could be the last warm bed, the last 3 hot, good meals, the last time somebody's good to one of these guys. This could be the best 30 days of their life, because when they get out, that may be it, and that's the dark side of it. On the bright side of it, I also see all kinds of guys that on paper aren't supposed to be living the lives that they're living today. I'm one of them.
Yeah.
I still laugh when I'm the executive director. It's funny. It is, because on paper, it doesn't add up.
Yeah. But at the same time, it's probably kind of perfect. I mean, when you live that experience, I was going to ask you the question, how have you carried over any of the punk rock ethos into what you do as a director, or how you approach like treatment and recovery?
Absolutely. One of the things that I liked about Discovery Place was I learned that it was founded on kind of some rebellious kind of stuff. So the two founders, they were getting super frustrated with insurance companies dictating what can and can't be talked about in treatment centers, in treatment center settings. And they decided, okay, so we're not going to start a treatment center. We're going to start a spiritual retreat, which is based on one addict, one alcoholic meeting with another. And we believe in that, and that doesn't mean if a place takes insurance that they're bad. There's a lot of fantastic places out there. There's some gnarly stuff going on out there. And anybody that's maybe been to treatment or been around the world of treatment and all that kind of stuff, that there's some people that are just kind of popping up and doing some stuff that is pretty sketchy, And so in some ways, my buddy Dan from way back in the day, the dude that ran the skate shop, he came and saw me. He was like, "Man, you think this is the punkest thing you've ever done?" I was like, "Maybe, man. I never thought about
Yeah,
it that way."
yeah,
Left home, yeah, I left home in all the ways. Uh, and, so I get to, I believe in what we do. We give quite a bit of scholarship money away every year. And we're not perfect. Nobody is perfect, but we try to help people. And I don't think that I could work in that if I didn't believe that we were really trying to help people. I just can't work. I can't, the problem that I have with some of the stuff that's going on is what does some random insurance company know about my life and how I should talk to this other dude that's lived my life,
right,
and
right.
that's the problem. I don't have a problem with anybody that does whatever they got to do. Some people they've got insurance and they're able to go somewhere, and that's beautiful. I have no problem with any of those people. I want to be clear about that. But
Yeah,
there's some stuff going on in this world, this treatment world that I just quite frankly don't agree with. And what I try to do is not concentrate on that. I just kind of concentrate on what we're doing, and do what I believe in.
yeah. I mean, I think that's pretty relative to everything. I mean,
Yeah,
there's so much focus to you can focus on external all day long because especially because there's so much going on and there is a lot. I mean, even in nonprofits, there's a lot of corruption and
yeah,
but I one thing that I've learned at this point in my life is that what I can do is within my grasp of my community and the people that I actually come in contact with because I have to be responsible for that, right? There's no excuses. Like you can get lost in what's going on in the world around you, but at the end of the day, you can't really you're powerless over those things.
yeah.
So it's important to stay, um, within your community. Um, well, I think I want to wrap it up. Are you feeling pretty good? I think well, I really appreciate you sharing a little bit of your life and I think the importance of recovery, like I said, it's interesting for me because I battled with the idea of seeking help or being like going to a meeting and it hasn't been up until maybe about 4 or 5 months ago that I started actually. I'm not going to every meeting. I'm not going to sit here and lie, but
Right.
I open myself up to the idea, like, yeah, but there's a part of me I could do it on my own. And I've done so much of my life is, like you shared has been that. Like I was just always afraid to ask for help. But again, that emotion or that feeling that stems from somewhere else. And
Yeah,
a lot of the problems I have, right, that I have to deal with are because I didn't ask for help. And so
yeah,
like when you make those connections, it makes it a little bit easier. And I find now that, okay, I'm in these spaces where there's other people that have gone through what I get. There's value. I didn't understand the utility of it before, but there's so much value in that utility of community, of being around other people that are recovering addicts. And again, with the people that have been previously incarcerated,
yeah.
it's and so yeah, but it's definitely like something for me that I don't do all the time, but I'm a little more open to it. And like I said, there's value in it. So I appreciate what you're doing. Before we actually, because to tie it back to go full circle, because I said that I wanted to ask about it because I'm a fan of the two gentlemen in the photo on the discovery page from the Instagram was Robert F. Kennedy Jr.
Oh yeah,
and Russell Brand,
yeah,
two people that I really enjoy their takes on a lot of different issues in life, philosophy, spirituality with Russell Brand. How did they end up? How did they end up at your place?
So we randomly met Russell at at a recovery meeting in Nashville. Turns out he was in town. We didn't know any of this. He was in town doing a fundraiser for RFK. And he went to a meeting that we run on Wednesday nights at a little clubhouse in Nashville called 202. It's been there since early 70s, I think. So it's kind of a staple of the Nashville recovery community. So we were running a meeting out there. He was there, and after the meeting, Russell said, "Hey, are you guys like with a treatment center or something like that?" And the second shift guy that was working, Evan, he said, "Yeah, you want to come out?" Just like not thinking that he really would. And he was like, "Yeah, I'd love to. I'm flying out tomorrow, but I would love to come out and see what you guys are doing." And so he came out, but I didn't know anything about the RFK thing. The next morning, this kind of dude rolled up in the parking lot, and I always go check, just
Yeah.
see who's rolling up and
Yeah,
see
he's
what's
rolling
going
up.
on.
Yeah.
It's like, "Hey man, can I help you?" And he was like, "Yeah, I'm here to do a tour." And I started looking at this dude, and he had like an earpiece on and stuff. And I was like, "All right." And then I noticed he had a bulletproof vest on.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, "All right, you with Russell Brand?" He was like, "Well, I'm with Robert Kennedy Jr. Him and Russell are friends. Is it cool if RFK comes out here too?" And I was like, "Absolutely, man. You
Yeah.
guys come on." And I'll give them this. They came out. They didn't talk politics. Nobody asked for
Wow.
votes. They did not do that. What they did is they sat down with the staff and the guests. The first thing Russell said is like, "Cool, man, we can look at buildings, but where's the attics?
Yeah.
I
Oh,
want to meet
wow.
them." And I was
Wow.
like, "All right, let's go." And so they met with our long-term guys and our first month guys and the staff, and they ran a recovery meeting for us, and
Wow.
it was really, really cool. It was a cool experience, man.
Yeah. Was there anything that either of them said that stood out to you?
The thing that stood out most to me is without recovery, I'm never meeting Robert Kennedy Jr. or Russell Brand, probably. Like without
Yeah.
recovery, that's probably not going to happen, first off. And then as far as speaking to these guys and what they said, we spoke the same language. Like they were just like me. RFK was just, I was a little nervous, of course,
Right.
but way more nervous about the RFK thing for some reason. I'm like, this is like American history walking up the sidewalk. Like, who am I? Like,
Yeah.
how is this happening? And, he was just a really, really regular guy. He was like, "I started shooting heroin when I was 15 after my dad got killed."
Russell Brand.
RFK.
All right. Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh,
He
wow.
just came out with that, and he's been very
Oh,
open about that
wow.
on
Yeah.
on social media
I
and
didn't know
different
that.
platforms and stuff. So I wouldn't tell that otherwise, but
Yeah. Yeah.
it's just that's the language that we talked,
Wow.
because I didn't know. I've never met
Yeah.
him personally. I didn't know if he was going to come out there and be like, "Could you vote for me?" And he never
Yeah.
did that. We
Wow.
just talked recovery. We were just addicts and alcoholics together, and that was it. And they were super cool. And yeah.
That is amazing. What a great experience. I still don't believe in the system that is in place, but when I look at someone like him, a dude that'll go outside and catch a snake in front of his house and like help free it, put it in the bag, and he's healthy, and I like a lot of what he says.
Yeah.
He would be somebody that I would ideally want to be a president.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, it's pretty amazing that you get to meet both of those guys. All right, well, yeah, I think we'll wrap it up. Just again, thank you, Thomas, for coming on. Any last words? Anything that you would like to impart for the people watching or listening?
Nah, man, I just appreciate your time. Again, without recovery, I'm probably never talking to you. You're never talking to me. It's just funny how things work out. So I appreciate you answering me, reaching out and giving me the opportunity to get to meet you and talk with you some. If you're ever in Nashville,
Oh yeah,
yeah,
most definitely. Same for you if you're ever out in LA for sure. Well, I'll be in San Diego next couple of years, so
yeah,
uh
congratulations on the school thing. So
yeah, thank you. I'm
yeah,
I'm very excited. All right, that's gonna do it and wrap it up for this episode of Screaming at a Wall. If you have found any insight, gained any knowledge from this episode, please subscribe to the channel. Until next time, stay free. Speaking of Russell Brand, I told you he stole that from me on his podcast. Stay free. I said it first. I'm telling you. All right, till next time. All right,
thanks,
peace.
man.
Yeah.
What are you rebelling against?
voters of this country don't care about the poor and
Now, baby, push me.